All right, everybody, let's call this first part of probably three of the plan to order. We're going to call the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee for part one to order. So, do I have a mover for our consent item? Councillor Ioannidis, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Discussion items. So we have Ms. Cooper to come and respond to questions regarding the Affordable Housing Strategy Work Program overview. Oh, and Mr. May would like to say something. Oh, no? Okay, you were clicked in. All right. Ms. Cooper, do you have a presentation or?
No, we have the report. I could give you a brief overview of what we hope to accomplish. As Council knows, we've heard a lot from the community around the issue of affordable housing, and Council directed that a business plan item be undertaken to prepare an affordable housing strategy. And planning and myself have worked together to prepare terms of reference for the work to be completed, and we're suggesting that in order to complete the work, we will be looking for some councillor representatives to an advisory committee, and we're in the process of hiring some staff to be able to assist in doing the day-to-day work. The project will be co-led by myself and Mr. Sloan, manager of long-range planning. The main objective is, in the first phase, is to give you a report back on the housing condition in the City of Kitchener, which has not been done before. We need to go into the data into quite a bit of detail in order to be able to respond to new provincial requirements if Council's interested in doing an inclusionary housing study. And I guess I'll leave it at that and be happy to answer any of your questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Cooper? All right, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could add to this project the requirements of the including development charges, affordable housing and the development charges. Like, could it be part of this study?
Yes, it will be.
It will be.
It will be. Yes.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Oh, and Mr. Reedman would like to comment.
Through the chair, so I would like to clarify. So we would do the background work to for the DC component. However, if there's implementation measures, that would be what we would look at under the phase 3 and 4.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I had a question. Oh, no, I don't. I just think it's great that we're doing. Oh, I do. When are we hiring the additional staff person that will be working on this with you?
We have interviews this week, and we expect to hire a person very shortly.
Okay, that's exciting. Yes. Thank you. We have additional questions now. Here we go. Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
No, I'm ready to nominate people for the committee.
All right.
You didn't seem to have any more questions, so I was
It's true, and now we have two others. So
okay,
maybe
come back to me.
Yes, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, could I just have a summary of what this project is going to cost, and was it included in our 2019 budget?
Yes, it was included in the budget. Council approved additional funding to be able to support the one staff person to be hired, and there's also approximately $30,000 in planning study money to be able to support the independent analysis that's required.
So what will the total cost of the project be? I'm not arguing with it. What would it be?
It was around $85,000 for the staff, and $30,000 is in a study. So 30 and 80 is $130,000.
Yeah, thank you.
150. Right. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Spontaneous math is not always easy.
Especially when you're sitting beside the
Yeah, he'll help you out anytime. All right, here we go. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, to me, the end of 2020 seems like a long time. Is there anything that staff has planned between now and then that we could start looking at, whether it be, containers that we set up in places for some of the homeless people, or any other, I don't know, ideas that you might have that could be started immediately?
Through you, Madam Chair, there are some things, but we won't be in a position to report back until we conclude the data analysis phase. But we are committed to identifying early wins in this process. We're going to have 4 reports to committee and council over the process, and at each one of those points we'll be coming forward to you with some ideas about what we can proceed with at that time.
That's terrific, because I know some media have been reporting that we're not going to see any action on this until the end of 2020, and so I think that's good clarification that we are indeed looking to see action earlier, as soon as possible. So that's good to get the message out. All right, Councillor Michaud.
So I just read this. I think I've just answered my question. So this plan here, there will be collaboration with the broader Waterloo region. Is that correct? Because
yes.
It is a universal thing all throughout the region, right? So
yes.
This is the first phase, and then when would the region, the planning or the talks with the broader community, the region, other cities in the region come into play? Is that in it?
If you turn to this page of the report.
2-4, I'm there.
With
Yep.
the big diagram on it.
Yep. Okay.
This outlines
Yes.
when we're going to be reporting out to the community and
Okay.
when we're going to be working with different agencies and groups. To clarify, the City of Waterloo has contacted us, and the City of Cambridge has contacted us, and they want to be directly involved in collaborating together in terms of doing the work that's required in their municipalities and our municipality at the same time for inclusionary zoning. We're also on a committee with the region of Waterloo dealing with housing plan for the whole region, and they support us doing a specific targeted analysis for the City of Kitchener. So we're working together.
Okay. Thank you. That's good to hear.
Sure.
Okay, there are no further questions for you
Thanks.
at this time. Thank you. Councillor Galloway-Sealock, can you click in? So do you have a nomination?
I have 2.
All right.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Chapman and Councillor Michaud.
All right. Great. I'll take all the nominations, and then I'll ask if they accept. Are there any other nominations? Councillor Davey.
I'll move Councillor Singh.
Councillor Singh. All right. Councillor Schneider.
I was also going to move Councillor Singh. I'll move Councillor Ioannidis.
All right. And I will move Councillor Schneider. All right. All right, so Councillor, so I'm going to ask each of you to tell me if you accept the nomination. Councillor, are there any other nominations before we do that? Hold on. Are there any other nominations? Okay. All right, so Councillor Chapman, do you accept your nomination? She does. Councillor Ioannidis, do you accept this nomination?
Yeah, I'll gladly step aside, considering I sit on Kitchener Housing already, and I consider that a board rather than a committee level, so I'll just sit on the side.
All right. All right. And Councillor Michaud, do you accept your nomination? Councillor Singh, do you accept your nomination? Councillor Schneider, do you accept your nomination?
I do.
All right. So we have 4 councillors on the ballot, but we have a maximum of 3. So you all have before you the voting cards. So please fill out 3 names: Councillor Chapman, Councillor Michaud, Councillor Singh, or Councillor Schneider, up to 3, and then we'll have the clerk read them out. Sorry, yes? Yes.
Just, we typically ask this question, so I just want to ask what the implications are of simply adding a 4th member to this committee.
Sure, yeah. Are there any, I guess we should ask staff. what, you've already told us a rule and we want to break it. So, so what would be the implications if we had 4 councillors instead of a maximum of 3?
So we were looking for between 1 and 3 to keep the representation of council somewhat in check with the balance of the rest of the committee. I think when you get to 4 or more people, you start to overpower a committee that's approximately 15 in number by your presence. So if you could keep it to between 1 and 3, that makes for a good dynamic for the committee. There will be opportunities for every councillor to come to any of the committee meetings to see what's going on, and certainly all of the community engagement that we anticipate as well.
Okay, so essentially if any one of us, you're saying, want to attend on a regular basis, we could, as long as it wasn't a majority of council, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's good. Thank you. Councillor Singh?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to ask the same thing as Councillor Davey.
Okay. All right, so back to our voting. Madam Clerk, are you going to read them out? Okay.
All right. So Councillor Johnson votes for Michaud, Schneider, and Chapman. Mayor Verbanovic votes for Chapman, Michaud, and Schneider. Councillor Marsh votes for Chapman, Schneider, and Michaud. Councillor Davey votes for Chapman, Schneider, and Singh. Councillor Singh votes for Chapman, Singh, and Schneider. Councillor Gazzola votes for Chapman, Michaud, and Singh. Councillor Ioannidis votes for Chapman, Singh, and Schneider. Councillor Michaud votes for Michaud, Chapman, and Schneider. Councillor Galloway-Sealock votes for Chapman, Michaud, and Schneider. Councillor Chapman votes for Chapman, Michaud, and Schneider. And Councillor Schneider votes for Chapman, Singh, and Michaud. So if you give me a second, I can tally those up and let you know.
while we're waiting for the results to come in, we have a comment from Councillor Johnston.
I'm not a math major, so I could not add those votes in my head. But what I wanted to say is that we've got 4 people who wanted to step forward and be on this committee. We know that whenever we have committee meetings, not everybody can make it out to everyone. I still think that it sounded pretty close as you were as the names were being read out, and I still think it would be important to have everybody on that list. I hate having to make decisions between different councillors, so I'm just going to throw that out there before the results are announced. Thank you.
Yeah, nobody wants to have their feelings hurt, and but we all have to make nominations for different committees. It's true. So just to clarify, I'm sure that staff will be letting all of council know when it'll be a publicly available meeting date and time. And so I know I, for one, don't want to sit on the committee necessarily, but I will be cheering from the sidelines. So I would like to be able to, I think anybody who is not nominated, who's interested, would like to come. So we have nodding heads. Yes, all right. Madam Clerk?
So Michaud has 8 votes, Chapman has 11 votes, Singh has 5 votes, and Schneider has 9 votes. So that would be Michaud, Chapman, and Schneider.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much. We have our committee members. So that will conclude our Part 1A of this meeting, and we'll come back in 35 minutes for Part 1B. Okay? Oh, sorry, yeah, never mind, that doesn't conclude. We are going to vote on the recommendation. Do I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Galloway-Sealock. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
That's the 500-meter walking circuit. Yeah. Yes, I'm hoping there will be some students. We'll see. Okay. Yeah. Is there a long list? Mr. Bill? He and I do not first come to this conversation.
Yeah, I gave this isn't a standard. This isn't this one here is not a standard. Yeah. So she's going to say this. Please note this is not a full vote meeting for Valley. The next phase of the project will involve public hearing. Okay. My daughter is a born teacher. She's a researcher instead. I guess she teaches when she's at It's amazing that occasionally you see someone who's absolutely born to do it. And she's one of them. She doesn't. That's the way it goes.
If I could just ask everybody to take your seats, we're going to be getting started in another minute.
Look at that sunshine. I drove right in front of the cottage.
All right, so welcome to Part 1B of the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee. Please note that contrary to what was published on the agenda, this is actually not a formal public meeting for the Hidden Valley Land Use Master Plan. The next phases of the project will involve public hearings. So first up, we're going to have Mr. Brandon Sloan provide us with a 5-minute PowerPoint presentation on the matter and respond to questions regarding the report on the Neighborhood Planning Review Hidden Valley Land Use Master Plan. All right. Mr. Sloan.
Thank you. Good afternoon to committee and members in the audience. So we're here today to talk about the Hidden Valley Land Use Master Plan. The location of the area that we are discussing is generally bound by the highway, Conestoga Highway 8 there, Grand River, Wabanaki, and just near Fairway Road. This area has 2 existing community plans that are council approved. One was in 1981 and the other in 1990. They are both out of date. A lot has transpired since then, including a regional decision on an arterial road that goes through this area. And so now it's time to revisit the land use. Very briefly, with that decision the region's made on the River Road extension, we now have an idea of where this road will be and what blocks of land are left. And so we're preparing this preliminary plan in advance of doing the formal planning amendments. So before we go and do the actual zoning bylaw amendment, the secondary plan amendment, and there's engineering infrastructure that needs a full environmental assessment, we wanted to give an opportunity for the public, the stakeholders, the landowners, and members of council to have some early input as to the direction of the future use of this area. Because where we're at right now, there's a lot of the vacant developable portions of the land still have an old business park zoning on them. And then we have a different section of the Hidden Valley area closer to the river that has a lot of existing estate and large lot residential. So although there's a lot of history, I think to focus the time on moving forward, these are some of the guiding principles that we've put forward in the public process to date for the future of this area. Important piece is to respect, enhance the character of that existing residential area. It's actually one of the last remaining estate residential locations that we have in the entire city. We have been talking about, at least from my recollection, since a report in 2005 where it referred to the significant environmental features in Hidden Valley as the jewel. So protecting the jewel is one of the top guiding principles for the future of this area. I think that'll be the topic of conversation today. It was in the past and it will continue to be in the future. But that is one of the number one objectives that we have as the city. When we look at the areas around the new River Road extension that have some development potential, we look at it both in the context of that specific future neighborhood, the community, and the broader city. And what are the needs, what are the directions, where are we going in terms of walkable, transit-supportive communities? And what we really came to is that this area only has essentially one use right now. And so our primary objective that we're after from a broader planning perspective is a more complete community. And so we're talking about shops, offices, places to work, and different residential types within the same area. What we're looking at in order to help achieve that is there's potential for mixing of different uses along River Road extension, but the overall idea is to have a measure of sustainability. So here's the plan that we have at this time. This is a preliminary plan. We have put this through some stakeholder engagement to date. What I'll probably do, given the time that we have, is I'll just walk through quickly each of the key items with respect to the plan. So first of all, number one, protect the environmental features and functions. So no development within the green areas. In fact, that's one of the primary mandates that we have. About 45% of the overall area within this study area is for environmental conservation and open space. Keep the estate and large lot residential. Enhance the character. So there's some items and directions in the master plan about some of the streets and roads in this area as well. You'll notice there are some areas that have a white to be determined area. I think at this time it's pretty common knowledge that there are some species at risk in this area. There are regulated habitat. Further study would be needed from the landowner. Our recommendation is it's too soon to determine what the land use in the future could be. I mentioned the new urban corridor and mixed uses around the River Road extension. Further up towards Fairway Road, it's an influence area near the Fairway Ion Station. There are some new potential parcels there We're looking at the potential for a local road to come off of River Road to help offset some of the access limitations and some of the, make sure there's a range of transportation and traffic options. That whole area would be centered around a new park. So any new development in this area is going to require some park space. At the gateway to the old Hidden Valley residential area and along Wabanaki Drive, we have an interesting transition from industrial to residential, and so it may be helpful to create more of a gateway to have some of the neighboring supporting uses. So the folks that are traveling along Wabanaki could stop into different businesses, shops, but if we can incorporate possibly some health uses, institutional uses, maybe even a community space into the development, it would make it that much closer for people in the Hidden Valley area to utilize and frequent and help with that complete community. And finally, I mentioned there's a very heavy industrial area that's zoned on the other side of Wabanaki. It's part of our protected employment. And so we have to be very careful not to introduce sensitive uses like residential too close. So this master plan provides some directions for distant setbacks and further study that would be needed. And that further study is going to come in the next steps. So today is the first time that committee and council are receiving and seeing some of this land use. From here, what we would do is a terms of reference for the detailed secondary plan and supporting studies. That's going to go hand in hand with a sanitary wastewater environmental assessment. So in order to develop the land along the River Road extension, it would need servicing. And so we have to go through a formal assessment to look at that. More directions are in the document, but essentially there is a ton of work that's been done in this area. The region conducted more than a decade of study that has looked at a significant amount of technical items. We're not fully satisfied that we have everything that we need to guide any future development. And so we still have a range of studies and assessments that would be undertaken as part of this work. We know that the area is very sensitive. We know that the region and the city are leaders in dealing with environmental conservation and development and water management and how we look at stormwater, groundwater, and how we protect our significant environmental features. And so we're going to endeavor to do even more. And so with that, the recommendation before you is essentially looking at adopting this as a preliminary plan, and it's giving direction to staff then in 2020 to go and do the detailed assessments and the formal planning instruments that we would be amending. So with that, I'm open for any questions, or we can hear from any delegations as well.
Yeah, we will have several delegations. And so I will ask council to hold their questions of staff until after the delegates. But first, Councillor Gazzola, you wanted a quick...
Yeah, I do want to ask just one question. I want to say first, at the appropriate time, I would like to move the recommendation. But I just want, if I could just ask one question of Mr. Sloan, and just to explain in a little more detail that what we're dealing with here today is a concept. It's a concept that's been put forward by staff after they have talked to a lot of interested parties, but we're not chiseling anything in stone if we move this recommendation. So if you could, Brandon, if you could just give a little more detail on that.
Sure, through the chair, I did refer to it as a preliminary plan. We've called it a master plan. This type of document would not be incorporated right now into our official plan. It's not necessarily an appealable document. This is really the guiding document for going to do the next steps. Essentially, it will get replaced with the formal secondary plan. And the formal secondary plan and zoning that are coming, that's where it would have more teeth. That's where there would be more authority.
All right, thank you very much. So we have several delegations. First up is Mr. Gordon Nichols.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Let me just take 20 seconds to introduce myself because I haven't been here in a while, and I believe half of the council don't even know who I am. I'm here as a member of the Friends of Hidden Valley, which was a very active organization during the past 15 years, but we've been a little dormant for the last 2 years, and that involved a necessity on my part to step aside because of personal reasons. My own personal background is that of a teacher of mathematics, and I therefore often come at this particular topic, which is an area outside of my own professional training, with a very quantitative point of view. And so with that, I'd like to start, and I believe the first slide is on the screen. And what I would like to suggest is that instead of taking the grand overview of hundreds of hectares and what does it do and what will it replace, let's look at the point of view of how does a family of four who's fortunate enough to have a house in a community like either Stanley Park or Country Hills live? And what I've done is, and the next slide will show this in a minute, I've taken a 1 acre building lot and divided it into 9 properties, and each of those properties would be 40 by 120 feet. And what the diagram is going to show you when you see it in a minute, thank you, is that if we assume each house had a footprint of 35 by 40, the backyard is going to end up being 60 by 40. And what does that mean? Which way do I point this? Sorry? The arrow, yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. So there is our 1 acre situation. Now that little green block represents how much green space would be available per resident if we assumed that there were 4 people living in each house. Not huge, but if you added up for the 9 houses all in a row and put all those blocks together, it would be a considerable green space, which, if you're fortunate enough to have the money and can live in a house, that's what you'd get. Now, we do have, though, a certain percentage of people in the city who aren't that fortunate. And this brings us then to the high-rises. And here's an example of a typical high-rise that's in the city. And there's a small green space, as you can see, out front of the building. What it works out to is that each resident would get about 1.4 square feet instead of the 600 square feet that I showed you on the previous diagram. Let's look at the future. What's going to happen? Well, not necessarily in the Hidden Valley area, but just north of the Hidden Valley area, going along the LRT corridor, we're going to have a huge impact between now and 2031. It's already underway, as I'm sure you all know, more so in Waterloo than what it has been in Kitchener, but Kitchener's starting to ramp up. So we expect about 50,000 to maybe 60,000 new residents by 2030. I'm going to work with the 50,000 number. It's easier to divide. Just to accommodate these people, there's going to probably have to be 125 new buildings with 400 residents to a building. And if we do that, how much green space are they going to get? Well, if the new buildings follow the model of buildings already here, it'll be about 1 to 2 square feet per person. There's maybe an example of what we might expect in the future, and you can see a lot of high-rises and then a little bit of green space. A very little bit of green space, in fact. Now, this is going to go along that LRT corridor. It raises the question, if we got that much construction and addition of residents going along the center spine of the city, do we need to really introduce more in the Hidden Valley area? Well, we think, and by we, I mean the Friends of Hidden Valley, which is an organization, we think that this whole area that's here should be preserved. Now, there are pretty good arguments for about 120 acres of it, because they are forested and they're also provincially significant wetlands. Then in addition to that, there's an area that the MNR has specified should be protected because there's an endangered species in there, and this is part of the migration zone. That leaves that red rectangle on the east side. Well, I'm sorry, it's not a rectangle, it's a quadrilateral. And that would be on agricultural land, which could be rezoned according to what proposals are coming in, maybe, although it's in the white area, an area that needs to be studied further. We would argue that we think that that area should be preserved, possibly reforested. Anyway, if we could conserve all 200 acres of the property, no development whatsoever, let's conserve the whole thing, then what would that give the 50,000 new residents? Well, it would be a large 200-acre park, of which 120 acres right now has got pretty mature forest in it, and there's 80 acres of open space. That translates into some numbers. Basically what it does is, for each of the 50,000 new residents that are going to be living in apartments and condos where there won't be any green space, you'd be providing 164 square feet per person. In a minute, I'll show you a picture as to what that might look like relative to the picture I showed you a few minutes ago. Basically, what that boils down to is it's an amount of green space equivalent to a bedroom 12 feet by 13 and a half feet. Not huge, but if you pack it all together, you get a space that is going to allow people to go and do some special things. Now, you might say, well, what kind of special things? Well, maybe there could be an athletic field. Maybe there could be trails. Maybe there could be open spaces with picnic tables where people could go and just spend some time on Sunday or Saturday. A whole lot of possibilities. And you may say, oh, well, why should we do this? Let me point out that there have been a few other cities in this country that have done this. And the councils in those cities at the time were prepared to look ahead. So Halifax, a long ways away from here, I know, but in 1894, the council decided that Point Pleasant Park should be preserved, and they started to replant trees in it because in the previous 100 years, the forest that was there was devastated. Now, of course, it's a very lovely 75-hectare park. That's 165 acres. And at the time when that decision was made, Halifax had 71,500 population. And then we have Montreal with Mount Royal Park.
Okay.
1872.
Mr. Nichols, if I could ask you to begin wrapping up, that would be great.
I will do my best. I'm afraid I'm about halfway where I would like to be, but it's very hard to present a, shall we say, a well-reasoned explanation in such a short period of time. Toronto's High Park is another example, very close at hand, where the size of the park, by the way, was 350 acres originally. It's now 400. And at that time, which was 1876, there was a donor who presented 175 acres to the city upon his death and his wife's death. The city council at that time decided, we're going to buy the adjacent 175 acres, which was 3 smaller farms, and add it to it. The population of Toronto at that point was only 70,000. No need for a park that size, but that council was looking ahead. They had a tremendous sense of vision for the future and the citizens that would eventually be there. And of course, as you know, Toronto is somewhat larger than 70,000 now. Anyway, we presented some specific suggestions on pages 42 to 49 of the staff document. I also managed to mail those to each of you individually, and so I'm not going to go through the specifics. I'm running out of time. But there was a map in there that was labeled A, B, C, D up to H with specific suggestions for each of those letter designations. And I would hope that as time passes, you will take the time to study that. We've tried to be very specific on things that we think can be done. I had wanted to have another slide here, and unfortunately we couldn't get it in, but I'll go backwards to there. That 600 square feet, that represented, oh, wait a minute. We can put that on the screen, yeah. Not that page, the other one. Okay? Oh, I didn't know. I'm terribly sorry. This is my attempt to bring geometry to the council chambers. Okay, going back to the same scale that was there before, there's the 1 acre property that had the 9 lots on it. I've taken the 9 lots out and put in, if you're able to own a house, then each person in the house would have a green space equivalent to that large green rectangle. If the council is prepared to say, we're going to save all 200 acres of Hidden Valley, then if there are 50,000 new residents along the corridor that could reach that by using the LRT and therefore not having to drive a car, there is the second green rectangle, which is 164 square feet. Not as big as the other one, but it's a chance for something.
Okay.
And then down at the bottom, you'll notice you can't see it.
All right.
I could not represent 1 to 2 square feet with anything that would show up. So it's a blank. And that's what you get if you live in a high-rise.
That's a powerful point. Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
I want to thank the council for taking the time to hear my presentation. I do appreciate it very much. I wish you all the best in the future in terms of making a decision on something that I personally think is extremely important for the future of our city.
We will have some questions for you if you could just remain at the podium. We have Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I would like to start by thanking you, Gord, for coming in. You've enlightened this and former councils on many occasions, so I do appreciate your comments. Do you live in Hidden Valley?
I do not.
Yeah, I know you didn't, and I wonder, and I'd like to, if you could just spend a few minutes talking about the Friends of Hidden Valley, just for some background for this council, which is relatively new since the last time you were here.
Back in 2003, the Region of Waterloo announced that they were going to proceed with the River Road extension. At that time, the plan was it was to go straight through the middle of the Hidden Valley property. And my wife was horrified with this. She was what I think you would call an environmentalist. And she organized a group of people and got them together. We called ourselves the Friends of Hidden Valley. The opening meeting that the region held was attended not only by our group, but 2 or 3 other groups. I believe, if I remember correctly, there were over 200 people in attendance that night. And I don't think one of them spoke on behalf of the fact that the road should go through the middle of Hidden Valley. So the region reconsidered and came up with a new plan. It took the next 3 years to sort of finalize what that plan would look like. And by 2006, the region had agreed that the River Road extension should go around the current roadbed using Hidden Valley Road and then cross the highway to connect on the other side. Our group in particular took exception to the design because in order to have a 90-degree angle across the highway, there had to be a great big sweeping curve going into the Hidden Valley area. And it was going to consume about 25 acres in order that there could be a highway movement of cars moving at 80 kilometers an hour. So we went again to council and presented an idea to change the bridge from a 90-degree angle to a 45-degree angle. This, of course, was going to increase the cost. Anyway, it took another 2 or 3 years, and finally there was an agreement on that, and time marched on because they didn't have the money to proceed with building right away, and all the studies had not been completed. Time was on our side. And then we got into the phase where we started discussing the respective merits of this property and some of the beautiful things that are in this property. Of course, the property is in private hands at this point, and as time progressed, the owner was wanting to proceed with development, which is understandable if you're the owner. we were coming at it from the point of view of the citizens in general. We certainly knew by 2010 that there was going to be a huge impetus going on in the city in terms of expansion. And although not all of you were on council at this point, there was a book put together that the City of Kitchener signed into called the Climate Action Plan for the region. And the city is one of the partners in this. And one of the things that was of great concern on about page 5 was the carbon footprint. I don't know whether you're familiar with this brochure, but I'm sure it would be available in the city archives. And in that carbon footprint plan, it pointed out that 40% of all the carbon that's coming out in this area is from transportation. That's a pretty large percentage. And if you can start to do something to make it possible for people to move back and forth without using automobiles, that would be a plus. And so we consolidated on the idea that, yes, we could bring people to a park space along this new central corridor, and they could use the LRT, and automobiles would not be used so much. A couple of positives. The other positive, of course, is that there is a certain advantage to forests in terms of actually reducing carbon dioxide and emitting oxygen. And I'm sure you're well aware of that and what the numbers are. So that was the work of the Friends of Hidden Valley. It went on for over a decade, and then we packed it in about 2.5 years ago, and there were personal reasons behind that. And then in the past 6 months, we have tried to, as we realized the planning stage is now coming, where the city is working so hard to prepare its plan, we felt we had to step back forward again. Does that answer your question, Mr. Gazzola?
Yes, it does, Gordon. You've used up all my time. It was well worth, I think, to bring everybody up to date how a group of dedicated citizens who don't live in the backyard, what they have done up to this point. So I'll ring in again later. Thank you.
All right, thank you. More questions for you. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing forward your presentation. Although we may not share entirety of the position that you're putting forward over the number of years, I really do appreciate the dedication that you put towards your cause and the commitment. So that's appreciated, I think, by the community at large. Where I do want to get more from your perspective is so it helps me where I'm coming from this is that you're saying that pretty much the full segment of Hidden Valley should be preserved for a natural area, and through your own comments you acknowledge that it's in private ownership, which would require the city to really take upon itself to purchase large segments of that land to give it benefit to the community. If it sits in private land, it's in private land. Although it's there, and you're preserving that environment, which is good, but it's not, you're not having any tangible benefit as a recreational benefit that you articulated that would be positive. By allowing some development, as staff have put forward, it would require and give us control to actually outline some of it to be recreational space and working with the developer. Don't you think that's a positive in that context?
Could you repeat your last sentence, please? I'm having a little trouble hearing you. If you could get a little closer to the mic.
So I was saying that by allowing, because right now the lands are in private ownership, by allowing to some development to take place, we could work with the developers to outline some of that space for recreational and protection at next to minimal or no cost to the taxpayer. Don't you think that's a positive, as opposed to the position where you have is saying everything should be just protected, but again, it would remain in private ownership, where we wouldn't really have any use of that recreational space?
I think if I was doing my thinking inside of the context of just the Hidden Valley area, I would agree. But when I expand my thinking to look at what's going on in the city in general, I have to disagree. Because I think you're looking at a much bigger problem. And I guess during my teaching years, when I was teaching problem solving, there was always more than one way to solve a problem. And I think that's what's going on here. And if this problem is going to be solved in the greater interest of the city at large, I think you've got to take the broader view. And I know that Mr. Sloan has presented a view that says for a complete development inside of the context of Hidden Valley, it would be nice to have some other things. And he mentioned shops. But in fact, Hidden Valley is very close to the Fairview shopping mall. Shops are not that far away. If you look in some detail at the proposal we presented, we suggested that the other side of Wabanaki, which right now is zoned industrial, if you really want to have shops and high-rises that close to the Hidden Valley area, that maybe you should expand the thinking and look there as well. And I realize there are some complications with doing that, but there also are some complications if you are unable to provide a large green space. Do you run the risk of creating an urban ghetto?
There is a lot of urban spaces being...
that has to be considered. You have to think about it.
That's where I was trying to get at, is, but there's still a significant green space being allocated and preserved out of what staff are recommending. And I'm sorry. I'm saying what staff are recommending, they're still suggesting a lot of space to be preserved, and that's still not sufficient?
This is true that staff is making a suggestion somewhere between 120 and 150 acres. What it would do is it would reduce the size of the green rectangle, let's put it this way. It's always fair to say a half a loaf is better than none. But I guess the thinking that has been inspiring people that I've been working with is we'd like to go, if possible, and convince this council you should try for the whole loaf, or at least as much of the loaf as you can possibly get. Because if we think it's in the interest of the citizens of this city in the future, and I, for one, are probably not going to be here to see 2031, but most of you people will be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Zola, more questions for Mr. Nichols?
Just quickly, Gord, you indicated that there are about 200 acres of land available that's not developed at this point. And you said there was 120, which is space that can't be developed on. And then what was the other 80?
Justin, can I go back to the regular PowerPoint at this point? Yeah. Okay, on this PowerPoint here, which I don't have the same picture as what Mr. Sloan had, but wait a minute, I got another picture in here. Yeah. All right, there's Mr. Sloan's picture. The dark green would about add up to 120 acres. The white area on the top right-hand side, which amounts to about 25 acres, and is under consideration for what will happen in the future. And of course, Brandon, am I allowed to give the reason? There's a species at risk situation there that might impact on that, and so further study is required for part of it. And then the area marked C, which is about another 10 to 15 acres, and right now it's in private hands, and there's a barn there and a farm, and possibly at some point that could be acquired. But those. In addition to those, there are two other small white areas also under consideration. The acreage there doesn't add up to a huge amount, probably only maybe 4 acres total.
Okay, that's the point. So your 200 acres is all of the green space, those white spaces, and Area C, but that would still...
No, it does not include Area C in my calculation of the 200. It does include those orange blocks up at the top left and the light blue.
Okay, so I wanted to clarify that. So your 200 includes Section G then? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Those are all the questions we have. Thank you very much, and thank you again for your dedication to this issue, and to you and your entire family. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next up, we have Mr. Matthew Rodriguez. Welcome.
Hello. Good afternoon, Chair Marsh and members of council. My name is Matthew Rodriguez, and I'm the chair of the Cycling and Trails Committee here at the City of Kitchener. I would just like to note at the beginning that this wasn't talked about at the committee, and just some of my personal thoughts and some comments on the Hidden Valley plan at this point. I'll keep my remarks brief, but I wanted to stress a few key active transportation matters for council and staff's consideration in planning for Hidden Valley. Overall, I think the Land Use Master Plan establishes strong priorities and policy directions to guide the future planning exercise in this area, including the transportation policies outlined on page 10, which are appropriately prioritized to shift focus away from the private automobile and the concentration of higher density and mixed-use development towards River Road to help create a node that is close to neighborhood commercial and recreational amenities. The City of Kitchener is making historic investments in cycling and trails infrastructure, and under that is two key initiatives, the Cycling and Trails Master Plan and the Complete Streets Guidelines, to help establish some new directions for the city. However, planning for active transportation doesn't stop at these two documents and the installation of a bike lane. If a resident cannot viably cycle between home, work, and where they shop, it's most likely they won't use it no matter the type of infrastructure. We could put in a world-class cycle track, but if it's not viable to get where you need to go, we won't actually see that shift in private automobile usage if that is in fact what we want to see happen. And that's where our land use plans come in. And we have a blank canvas here to work with to really do something innovative. Recognizing that if approved, there's a lot more work to be done, and this is very early. I would just like to note a few things for council to consider and staff to consider as the project progresses forward. Firstly, that the secondary plan policies align with the recommendations and policy directions of the Cycling and Trails Master Plan. Where possible, the two plans should be formed in tandem as work will continue into 2020 on both of these documents. Next, that the Complete Street Guidelines inform the street typologies in the Hidden Valley area, and that innovative streetscape guidelines, not elsewhere seen in Kitchener, be explored to the greatest extent possible. And this should be complemented by appropriate zoning regulations, such as tighter front yard setbacks and stricter and more condensed driveway regulations, just to help improve the pedestrian environment and the streetscape, both from a functional and visual standpoint. That direct, protected, and well-planned cycling routes be established a Fairway Ion station. We're very close, and I think there's a really great opportunity to develop that route and ensure it is well utilized. Last couple things, that road cross sections and intersections be designed with cycling, pedestrian, and transit connections at front of mind, with automobile space allocated afterwards. Not traditionally done, but as I said, we have a blank canvas to work from. And finally, that connections be made to existing cycling corridors and trail linkages, including Wabanaki, Manitou, and across the expressway. We have the opportunity to affect strong results and innovative design in the future development of Hidden Valley when transportation objectives, and specifically active transportation objectives, are wholly integrated into land use plan decisions and work to support the strong environmental protections that are in place and will be needed in the Hidden Valley area. Thank you very much for your time. That's all I have to share today.
Okay, thank you very much. We have some questions for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I really don't have any questions. I want to thank you for coming in and putting your thoughts forward. And I do want to point out, to show what how much staff has done already on this. If you were to look in there in the detailed report, you can see all of the various departments and divisions that have been included in the study up to this point and will be required down the road, and transportation, active transportation is a major player at the table.
Yeah, no, I did read that. Thank you.
Okay, those are all the questions we have. Thank you very much for your presentation. Next, we have Mr. Neil Taylor.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you for allowing me to make a short presentation. I'm sorry that came from the cottage, and I'm just a talking head today. In letters and articles, I have for many years described Hidden Valley as an emerald gem. In fact, I think I'm the original author in the area calling it a gem. That the biodiversity in Hidden Valley has no parallel in the city of Kitchener. The province has designated 3 provincial significant wetlands. The region is designated as an ESPA. It has recently mapped about 45% of the area as protected environmental land and designated as natural heritage conservation because of the natural features consisting of eskers, wetlands, and hardwood forest. I compliment the planning staff for the process they have undertaken. They have attempted to get ahead of any resistance or challenge to the development contemplated for this precious area. Nevertheless, I'm not satisfied that all the options have been fully canvassed or considered, and I've articulated this in correspondence and oral representations, and I appreciate those opportunities. This master plan adds no more environmental land to be protected. It merely contemplates 2 measly, pitifully small parkettes. I say shame. This allows the remaining land to be 100% developed and paved. This is not conforming to sound planning principles. The word that describes this plan best is intensity. Intensity of development and intensity of new traffic. Intensity of development is acknowledged by the intent to quadruple the population currently residing in the area. This is hardly respecting the existing neighborhoods nor offering protection for the unique environment features. Neither is the intensity about to enhance the community. Intensity of new traffic along Wabanaki Drive, Fairway Road, Hidden Valley Road, and Highway 8 will compound the existing congestion in the area. This afternoon, I drove along Wabanaki, and I was a full 7 minutes between Hidden Valley Road, the roundabout proposed on Wabanaki at Hidden Valley, before I could make a right-hand turn. It was backed up 3/4 away, and it's a joke to think that roundabouts within a few hundred meters are going to make that better. The traffic engineers said that they've said that the state will be proposed road system will be able to handle this increased intensity of traffic. But traffic engineers said that about the Don Valley Parkway, about the 401 both directions between here and Toronto, on the Conestoga Parkway, and number 8, the best parking lot in our city. Such predictions have proven false in the past. Why should one have confidence as they see current traffic congestions in the Tri-Cities of the region that was once predicted never to occur? In an OMB hearing I attended, 2 statisticians had 2 opposing points of view and were pretty convincing. That's what traffic engineers can do as well. Jobs are touted as being a rationale for the intensity. Jobs for how long and for who? Taxes are never reduced by development. The city recognizes that Hidden Valley is a unique and beautiful area of Kitchener, yet by itself does not offer to expand the existing natural area. This area is the last significant area available to be preserved and expanded for the future. Surely the city might still have some visionaries, like A.R. Kaufman, Homer Watson, who would dedicate themselves to acquire more land and have it protected, so that generations to come may praise and not condemn our actions and our decisions. We are all invited to do the right thing. Let's put our hearts, minds, and monies towards doing just that. Thank you. 20 seconds left.
Well done. Thank you very much. We have some questions. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, Neil, thank you for coming in. I know that have participated in the 2 public meetings that staff have held. Have you also discussed your concerns and issues with staff?
Sorry?
Have you also, in addition to the 2 public meetings, have you discussed on a one-on-one basis with Mr. Sloan your thoughts?
Not as often as I would like, but I must say that Brandon was kind enough to return a phone call where I was at my cottage this past week, and he gave me great time, and not only that, clarified the agenda, because that was very misleading to this citizen.
So are you satisfied that you were able to get through to Brandon on anything? Or?
I'm still working on it. I think it's, Councillor, it's a complex thing, but I do suggest that there could be a will. This could involve the owner, the council. It shouldn't all have to be the taxpayer. And 2 little parkettes to suggest that is offering something in lieu of the 100% development where it can be developed. Set aside what the region is already in their official plan. It's called Natural Heritage Conservation. 100%. I don't see that that's very generous in terms of offering something to the general public.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are all the questions we have for you. All right. Next we have Doon Moulton from the Grand River Environmental Network.
Dion.
Dion, thank you.
It's all right.
I had a feeling that wasn't right.
I've lived with it for a long time.
Dion.
Good afternoon. Thank you for listening to us. I am, unlike the last gentleman you've heard, a newcomer to this file, and so I'm learning on my feet. But I come here as a representative of the Grand River Environmental Network. And many of our members are residents of Kitchener, but we also come as representatives of the broader interest. The broader public interest invested in the ecosystem services which are available currently and potentially in Hidden Valley. I want to say that Grand River Environmental Network stands supported and behind the work of the Friends of Hidden Valley. Kitchener is committed to healthy communities. The ecosystem services which are available in Hidden Valley as it sits today are a fundamental part of maintaining that healthy community. Hidden Valley is so much more than a pretty picture out a bedroom window. Hidden Valley ecosystem provides services which directly and indirectly impact the health and well-being of Kitchener, both specifically within Hidden Valley and in a broader context. It is possible to model these values in economic terms. Ecosystem services include provisional type services, those parks and other material goods, regulatory services such as flood control, biodiversity, erosion control, the cultural assets, that pretty picture out the window, and broader values of support for the greater ecosystem, soil creation, air quality, etc. I suspect your planners are familiar with these values. These ecosystem services can be seen to have an economic value and a public interest, as people derive benefit from them, though not always in terms of market dynamics. We, GREN, believe that all current and future studies that are done on this piece of property and in terms of permit applications should articulate a cost-benefit analysis of ecosystem services. These models are accepted practice. There's one available through the Department of Farming, Rural, Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs through the government of the UK, which is used by the European Union. They exist, and they present an opportunity for councillors. These evaluations present an opportunity for councillors to see, in terms familiar to them, impacts and costs of the loss or degradation of the ecosystem services which are currently available. The city has an obligation to protect the public interest. It does that through planning. And heritage designation is an important tool which can be used in planning to protect the ecosystem services and thereby the public interest. In Hidden Valley, heritage designation area should be determined prior to any consideration of infrastructure development that would disrupt any of those ecosystem services. We, as a people, have learned through experiment that degradation is not easily, effectively, or cheaply repaired or replaced. Lastly, we believe that the cost of any infrastructure development, or the majority of the cost of infrastructure development that disrupts ecosystem services, should be paid for by the people who profit from it. It is unfair from the citizens of Kitchener to ask them to bear the eco-service cost and the fiscal cost of such developments. In short, Gren asserts that the master plan should value and protect the ecosystem services of Hidden Valley. And as an addendum, I would like to suggest that one of the things you put at your gateway, assuming that you actually do that, is an educational center, which serves to support the values of Hidden Valley. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There don't appear to be any questions for you right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Hannah Domagala. From the Pearl Valley Development Corporation. Welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Is my presentation up? I have a short presentation, and first of all, I would like to thank Council for listening to us and thank staff for a very good cooperation. We actually agree with the direction the Land Use Master Plan is going and would like to just look at some items and discuss them in more detail. I'm here for Pearl Valley Development Corporation as an urban designer and somebody who has built communities for almost 20 years. It is my pleasure to actually be working on this project. As you can see, Pearl Valley owns the largest undeveloped piece of land in Hidden Valley, and we are looking at this as a potential for a great neighborhood, for something that the city has not seen yet. This is not just a development project for us. This is something very important to our hearts, and that's how we look at it. So it's not just a business exercise for us, it's a design, environmental, sensitivity, and community integration perspective. We have provided thorough comments in March and in May, and we have been through all of the public stakeholder consultation sessions. The owner has done it himself as well. Today I would like to just speak shortly to 5 points, and the first one is site context. First of all, look at this. This is a tree and some corn growing, right? This is what we see and what we focus. If we step back, we see that this tree right in the middle is surrounded by a wetland, rolling topography, a few trees, and that's true. That's what Hidden Valley is right now, today. It's a greenfield site by definition, so something not developed before. But you have to step back once more to see where it is located. So most of all, it is within a built-up area, right next to the terminus of the current Ion Phase 1 and right along the Phase 2 with a potential stop perhaps at our edge of the property. So it is within major transit station areas, Brendan has also noted. It is at the key gateway. What do you think of when you enter Kitchener today? Imagine just what you could be looking at if this property is developed very well and nicely, and that's what we care about. It can definitely enhance the user's experience of entering the city. And most of all, it has tons of amenities again, so this should be a place built for people, for the residents that are coming. This is not a suburban greenfield site. This is actually a greenfield site right in the heart of a built-up area. So within this context, so when you look at it and step far enough away, you can see that higher densities are actually also welcome here from a good planning perspective, for a complete community perspective. So when we look at the proposed master plan, we actually agree with it. All we're asking is that a certain section along River Road be designated a bit more higher densities. So just make that blue red. And that's only because we consider the roundabout as the node of our community. So it's this beautiful pedestrian-oriented space that we envision between the wetland and the Ion Station, so the Fairview Park Mall. That's something where people can congregate all of the current neighbors and the future residents, something where they can beautifully live and work along. And then higher densities suited to arterial roads, which can handle the higher traffic. The rolling topography can site taller buildings very well. We just like to see that along the arterial road for future developments, more for a complete community. So the technical studies that Brendan mentioned that will be done, we fully support and would like to participate in. We just want to make sure that all of our lands are studied for servicing. We believe that all of them can be serviced, that every future resident of Kitchener should be living along serviced areas, so we will work with city staff to make sure that all aspects of servicing are analyzed and offer our support. Next one is something that has been talked here a lot about, natural heritage conservation. As the owner will shortly speak to, this is the gem for us as well. We do not want to destroy any of the special features that are there. We want to conserve and protect them. We are fully committed to be great stewards. We have been and we will be doing it for the next years to come. We are doing studies right now on the natural heritage aspects. And we are going to be getting back to the city staff to make sure that the right areas are protected and that their developable areas are also given for the enjoyment of future residents. So that's work that will be ongoing from us to make sure that, again, the right areas are protected. And the last point is to the site-specific policy areas, noted with number 2 on the side, so there's 2. Here we would like to stress that the south parcels, so the smaller 2 parcels, 2A in the land use master plan, are already zoned residential, and there's a draft plan of subdivision. So this, again, for compatibility reasons, we think that both of these parcels also should be residential. We don't want to change that designation. We just feel that more variety to low-rise residential. Today, we're in the 21st century. We're talking about affordable housing all the time. We have tons of estate lots, residential. We want to make sure that there's a greater variety of low-rise residential. We feel, and as it has been said by our planning consultant, that these lands should stay residential. Also 2B should be designated for residential uses with a special policy stating that there's a permitting process, of course, by the province of Ontario that will make sure that any endangered species are protected. What this means to council is that designating it residential is safe because that permitting process trumps any designation. So if we don't get a permit, we can develop. So that's just my last point. And I just wanted to make sure that we thank you and that you look, as Councilor Gonzalez says, this is just over a master plan that we will be working with staff to make sure that the lands are serviced, designated, and that we have a complete community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we have some questions for you. First up is Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Marsh. Thanks, Hannah, for coming in. The questions that I have is when we're looking at the portion of where you marked red that was previously mixed use. What is the land size of that portion?
Let me just check. So that whole parcel from the blue right now to the orange, the entire parcel is about 25 hectares. So that small portion is a matter of maybe 8 plus minus. So it's actually a very small area, but it's critical to kind of the affordability and the completeness of the community.
Okay. And then my other question is in regards to the white portions, the ones that you're saying to have a residential designation. Is that land mass part of Pearl Developments?
Yes, okay. The white areas are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. There are 2 sides to every story, and this is part of the other side. You're looking at this as a tremendous place, tremendous green space and all that, but are you looking for that for development, new development that you're putting in, or are you looking this as a space that benefits the entire community and region?
The green space or the development?
The green space.
The green space, the owner will talk to you more about, but this is definitely something for the enjoyment for many, many people, right? How it plays out, what will happen, that's something we can definitely discuss. But this is an area that's large enough that many people can enjoy.
Okay, that's the point I want to get to. When you talk many, many people,
Yep.
we're not just talking about some new residents of this area. We're talking our entire community.
That's definitely a potential.
Just while that map is up, just to clarify for council, it's virtually all of that area is under the ownership of Pearl, right?
Almost all of it.
Yeah,
Okay. Except for a couple of houses and some of the light yellow properties.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We have more questions. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Hannah. Just a question, just some clarification on your claim for low-rise residential and affordable housing. This is a pretty hot area. This would be a desirable area for anybody to live in if their property's backed onto a green space like this. So explain to me how this could be affordable housing.
I said to complete the community, more affordable housing than the large estate loads proposed. So within the planning today of the City of Kitchener, right now we have 8 low-rise designations, right? So it spans anything from ground access to very tight units to large estate lots. But between there's a whole range of low-rise. So that's something we would like to discuss. What is the appropriate use? Is it really the 50-meter frontage lots? Is that the time that we are living in today, that there's more of that needed because we already have 100 of those in Hidden Valley, right? Or can we make it more affordable for people, so smaller lots? But I'm not saying it has to be the most dense low-rise residential. I'm just saying let's look at it more comprehensively to designate it the right low-rise for this area.
Okay, so your definition of affordable housing, just to piggyback on that, my follow-up question is you're not talking about officially affordable housing units that you're proposing to build on that property that would be...
At this point, staff has only proposed estate residential lots. So we want to change direction, first of all, away from estate residential lots and see how, what can we actually do there, right? We're talking about a complete community, so we are going to be analyzing affordability within the entire community because we know we have lots to offer in this area.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are all the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, we have Mr. Peter Benninger.
Thank you, Chair Marsh, Mayor, Councillors, for the opportunity to come in. I'm Peter Benninger, and I'm the president of Pearl Valley, which owns the 200-plus acres that has been discussed, known as Hidden Valley. So I must say to you that today's a special day. I may not show on the outside that I'm really excited, but I can tell you on the inside I am jumping with joy. I expected to be here chatting with you about Hidden Valley 13 years ago. We're finally here today, and I actually think it's a great thing that it took this many years to come to this point, because I think that we've all seen a change in development vision and the way neighborhoods and communities are built, and I think it's given us a better opportunity to do the right thing going forward for many years. I want to give you a bit of personal background and a bit of a backstory on how I came to own Hidden Valley. I was marketing this property in 2002 for the then owners, and over a 2-year period, this property was tied up by 3 different developers and under a conditional exercise, and each of the 3 walked away from the opportunity because of the environmental areas, the environmental protected areas, the woodlots, and the provincially significant wetlands. That is why they walked away from the transaction. So during that period, I grew to love Hidden Valley and established a good working relationship with the owners. And at the end of that period, we agreed that I would become the proud owner of Hidden Valley. So that was in 2004. I just want a little bit further about myself and my career. And during my career as a realtor, I've actually enjoyed a very good working relationship with the City of Kitchener. I spent over 20 years on Economic Development Advisory Committee, many short-term committees throughout that period. And I think during that period got to know a lot of the folks, both at council and staff, and grew an appreciation for the city, the pulse of the city, and what I think the city is looking to do and accomplish for its citizens. As well, during that period, I spent 7 years on Canada's Technology Triangle and 10 years on the region's Reurbanization Working Group, which was a committee that was held during the period of the planning and approval of the LRT. I want to thank the City of Kitchener for those opportunities in the region as well, and I'd like to think that I'm going to put the lessons that I've learned during that period to practice at Hidden Valley. Over the past several years, I've enjoyed working with Brandon Sloan and Alain Pinard in discussing and envisioning the future of Hidden Valley. And as Hannah just pointed out, we don't 100% agree on everything. But I'm sure that we can continue great dialogue as we've had throughout the years and coming up with something that we can all be proud of, the city and ourselves. In the 15 years I've owned the property, I've had many challenges in protecting the lands from unwanted visitors and occupants, 4x4s, ATVs, literally thousands of pounds of garbage being dumped on the lands. It's been very difficult to control this and at times been costly and seemingly a fruitless exercise. Recently, a group of Hidden Valley residents who are very concerned with some of the activities of these unwanted events have organized. We've been meeting with them. Councillor Gazzola has been there, as well as a representative, Constable Mitchell from the Waterloo Regional Police, and the City Kitchener bylaw, Steve Ventrose and Gloria McNeil. We've all taken action on what's been going on the property. We've gone out and purchased ATVs. We're patrolling the property. We've got to clean up over the next several months an estimated 30,000 pounds of garbage that has been dumped on the property. The police have offered timely response to our calls of concern, and we're going to do a better job of gating the areas that are most vulnerable. And most importantly, we've set up a Hidden Valley Watch program with the neighborhood. I'm extremely encouraged that we can do this and get this cleaned up and maintain the area. I don't feel quite so alone in the effort since this has been organized the last few months. I've always said about this property that the more eyes that are on it, the more it will be protected, the more beauty it will be maintained, and I think you'll see that as we develop a vision and a plan for what happens in the developable areas, we'll be able to get those eyes in place and protect this jewel forever. One final thing that I've done is I've brought Hannah on board. You met Hannah earlier. Hannah has a Master of Architecture degree from University of Waterloo. In her 20-year career, has worked in all aspects of community building design at architecture firms as an urban designer for the region of Waterloo. She's directed strategic projects in Europe for a large municipality for a number of years and recently helped to manage construction projects for the Zaire Group, including 2 years revitalizing the Catalyst on Glasgow Street.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Benninger, if you could just wrap up your comments.
Will do.
Please.
I'm very close. Now, putting all this broad international and real-life experience into planning and design at Hidden Valley, I'm very pleased and thankful to Hannah for joining me. I think we can all realize the vision with her assisting me and driving things forward. My personal role over the next number of years is to realize the legacy that will come from protecting and enhancing the jewel we know as Hidden Valley. I see it as something my family can point to for generations as a thank you to the community and the support it has given me over the past 40 years in growing my career. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mr. Gazzola, Councillor Gazzola has some questions for you.
Thank you, Peter, for joining us. I was hoping you were going to make some sort of an announcement, a big announcement, like you're going to donate all that white land to the city. But I do want to recognize that, and you have indicated how involved you have been in our community, that you are a good corporate citizen of this community, have done a lot of things to assist us in the past. I think. And I do, the staff that you've hired, it's encouraging to see people. I know Hannah has a good background in urban design and all that. So I'm pleased to see you, and I do want to also reiterate the fact that you've had this parcel for about 15 years, and there's been a lot of work just on keeping the garbage out and collecting the garbage that's been littered there, and all of the other things, and the issues that, as the owner, you've had to deal with them. And we at the city and our property standards people have been after you, and you have cooperated in what you've done. I do hope that going down the road, I know that you've had input, and we're just really at a concept here, a starting point, and I hope as we move down the road there will be give and take, and the more you have to give, the more we would hope that happens. So I have no questions. Thank you again for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Peter, for coming in, and as Councillor Gazzola indicated, for your involvement in this property over the years and in your involvement in the broader community. I know over the past 15 years at different points in time, we've had an opportunity to dialogue a little bit around your vision for this property, and you mentioned today sort of this notion of your family's legacy, towards the community. As we go into these various planning processes that are going to follow today's meeting over the next while, I'm wondering, has there been any further consideration given by you, or might you be willing to look at sort of how this, jewel from a environmental point of view could see some model development occur which would in fact complement it. So, I start thinking about some of the kinds of things that are happening in various communities around LEED Platinum, around, or other types of, net zero development, all those kinds of things that that we've seen and would actually complement this in many ways. Is that something that you see as part of your vision as this develops, and would be open to having further dialogue around?
Yeah, absolutely. And just even in the last few months since Hannah joined in January, we've had the opportunity to go down to Toronto and meet with some folks that are actually doing LEED neighborhoods, not just LEED buildings, but LEED neighborhoods. We've gone down to the Sifton project and looked at their net zero project. Those are all things that we're exploring. You have to look at, are they suitable? Are they manageable from a, from a financial perspective? Those sorts of things. But absolutely, we want to explore those, and we kind of crammed that in the last few months as Brendan was working towards this final vision to sort of see if there's some marrying of those ideas. I think we've got a long way to go to get there, because we've got to get through the zoning process and that sort of thing. But yeah, absolutely.
But I think some of that could actually work its way through in those subsequent processes going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gazzola. Oh, wait, you had questions already. I'm going to... Okay, so I'll ask you to queue back in at the appropriate time. Okay, so Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you, through the chair, and thank you, Mr. Benninger, for coming in today. And to piggyback some on Mayor Verbanovic, why can't I say your name today? My goodness. On the mayor's remarks, I was wondering, there was a presenter earlier who had asked about some kind of an educational perspective, or some kind of I wrote it down here, like an education center or something like that. And I won't ask you to commit to anything like that, but I'm thinking that in the spirit of the gem of Hidden Valley, perhaps that's something that you might consider as well. as you move forward.
Yeah, it's really good to listen to those comments. I've got a lot of things going around in this brain about the opportunities that exist there. And so again, just to come back to my final point, I really look forward in the next number of years. You know, I just started collecting a pension, so I don't think I'm going to see the realization of all the built form that Brendan is going to plan for, but I can see the realization of what we do with the protected areas as you're speaking of. So that's kind of my thing for the next few years. So yeah, lots going around up in this rattling. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Thank you, Mr. Veninger, and the rest of the delegates for coming out. This is a very sensitive, passionate issue for many, yourself included, Mr. Veninger. I'm delighted to hear that you would consider doing considers the comments that Mayor Verbanovic had suggested, and taking it a step further, what Matthew Rodriguez, the Cycling and Trails rep, said. Secondary planning policy, making less vehicle space, making it more walkability, cycling, like just kind of make it a very unique, if this is the direction it goes, make it a very unique place would probably give more confidence in the fact that if you are going to develop it, and in truth it is your property, and you know, it's your right, and I appreciate you taking the time and the consideration for this. But I also feel that this is a very significant piece of property in this city, and we don't have very much property left like this. So I do hope that going forward with the planning, that there is some really strong considerations on all that's been talked. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I think I would challenge that the city doesn't have as nice of a bush as I do. We'll put the competition out there.
All right. Thank you so much. Those are all the questions we have for you.
Yep, great. Thank you very much.
All right. So now I'm going to ask committee to click in for questions of staff. Councillor Cazzola.
Yeah. Mr. Sloan, can you just, I'd like to broadly get some concept of timing if, and hopefully this recommendation will pass, and in passing that, it's going to indicate, you've indicated a number of studies that are already done, but there were still a number of studies that need to be done. And with I want to just clarify the River Road extension, which eventually is going to get over from River Road on the other side of the highway to Cortland Avenue, is finally been approved and in the budget for the region. But can you just, and it's been broken up into two phases. The one phase going from the Wabanaki Hidden Valley Road over to Cortland, and the second phase coming from River Road over to that point. Can you just give me a timing of when that's expected?
Through the chair, so the timing from the region's capital budget forecast is phase 1 of River Road. In terms of expected construction timing is 2020 to 2021. So that's the portion from Manitou to the new roundabout with Wabanaki. Phase 2, the current timing in their capital forecast is 2023 to 2024. And as many know, that is now under consideration as one of the preferred routes as part of Stage 2 ION work that is ongoing and studies that are ongoing. As it relates to the land use studies, moving forward from today, in the second half of 2019, planning and engineering would prepare the terms of reference for the detailed technical studies. We have it budgeted and work programmed to undertake it in 2020. While we haven't finished the terms of reference, I would expect it to be 12 to 18 month process, because it would include public engagement and formal notification. That gives us plenty of time to complete the land use studies in advance of the phase 2 of River Road extension.
So in the final analysis, when do you see coming before council with a secondary plan? A ballpark, I don't want to, because there's a lot of work to be done, but just some idea.
Through the chair, I think, as I indicated, we haven't finalized the terms of reference of the exact process and community engagement, but if we start in 2020 and it's 12 to 18 months, that would put us back at council in 2021.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. The first question I want to ask is staff's perspective. I've heard there was some delegates that were concerned about the density. Could I get staff's opinion on the level of density? Have you ever dealt with an area this large? And can you compare it to other areas in terms of the density?
Sure, through the chair, there's probably quite a lot of points that we could discuss on that, so I'll try and hit on a couple key ones. This area is a little bit different than the last community master plan that we did. I was part of the Southwest Community Master Plan, what became the Rosenberg Secondary Plan, which was even larger than this area. What we do is we do transit-oriented development and transit-supported development. So we link the land use and transit, and so that's why we're looking at where the transit could be, will be, and we do the planning around that. So we orient density to have active transportation and transit users. The other part of it here is we want to, of course, we're protecting the entirety of the significant environmental features, and there's some of the estate residential. So really the best place for density is more towards that transit route, which would be Fairway River Road. And so we're looking at orienting the density there. Really, we took a broader look, and what we're aiming for is the missing middle. So there's kind of this growing contingent, like we're getting many more tall condos. We have enough low-rise res in the rest of the city. What we're kind of missing is that 4 to 8 story sweet spot. And so that's where we're going with our recommended plan, with both the mixed use and the mid-rise res would allow 4 to 8 stories. It allows a whole range of different dwelling types. You could, even in the mixed use, you could do just standalone res, or you could actually have some other commercial uses on the ground floor. There's some other items I could talk about in terms of the density. As Hannah mentioned, it is technically a greenfield site, so we do have some targets we're trying to achieve.
In terms of the entire parcel, though, I would say that the density per acre is, from what I've seen in the past, is quite low.
Through the chair, I would say for the whole site it is. I've done some estimates for just the new urban corridor where the purple, red, orange, and blue are, and roughly we're looking at somewhere in the 90 to 100 persons and jobs per hectare estimate.
Okay, thank you. I want to confirm, I read the number that 45% of this parcel will be preserved as green space, natural heritage, et cetera. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is roughly correct. It's about 88 hectares out of a total of 200 hectares of this study area.
Okay, great. And that, I'm presuming that does not include the white portions here that are to be determined at some future point.
Through the chair, that's correct. And that also doesn't include future parks that would be needed as part of any development as well.
Okay, so it's safe to say by the time this is all said and done, we could see that number approaching more than half.
Through the chair, that is possible.
Okay, thank you. I'll have comments as well, Madam Chair.
Okay, that sounds good. Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you. Through you to Mr. Sloan, I'm wondering, as a new councillor, if you can provide a little bit of historical context here, and if perhaps if you can't answer the questions, maybe other staff can. But I'm wondering about the first development that went on here. So the current residential housing that's there. I'm wondering when that was first developed. Do you know when that happened?
So through the chair, yes, there is a fairly long history for this area, and I decided to kind of skip over that for the sake of time on the presentation and just talk about where we're going. The road was originally approved, the River Road extension, in 1981, and it still hasn't been built. This area only had one access point, so it was very limited. It was hard to find in the river valley, hence the name Hidden Valley. There is a contingent of properties that, and some of the families are still there, of some of the original properties there was a lot of horse stables in the area. The Bridle Path Estate subdivision was kind of the first one to really get into having a new subdivision. And so that's kind of Hidden Valley Crescent, Cantor's Close, that area. So that really got going into the later 90s. Once there was then, what happened after that and around that same time was the Wabanaki extension to Fairway Road, which then technically gave a second means of access. To the west of it was more of a large lot subdivision, and that's one of the plans that I was the planner for. And so that was kind of 2003, 4, 5, 6, and still being finally developed to this day. Those are 80-foot wide lots. The Bridle Path's 100-foot lots. So now we're looking at really more of the future area along the River Road extension. There's a lot more we can get into. I was part of the region steering committee since 2003. They spent more than a decade studying this area, so it's been very intensive. Lots of study, lots of public engagement, lots of information.
Thanks, and I appreciate that, and that was one of the reasons why I asked that. I think that historical context is important. To me, that land looks like it was extremely environmentally sensitive as well. And so I'm just wondering about the discussion that took place when that was first being proposed as well.
Sure, through the chair, maybe just a couple key points. The approved 1981 alignment actually went right through the significant environmental features. And so it was a major, major step for the region to say, hey, times have changed, environmental policies have changed, let's reopen that and restudy it. And it took a Herculean effort to go through that, and things changed throughout the process, but it led to a more improved road alignment. It led to a significantly more amount of the significant environmental features that are now to be conserved. There was some mention from some of the delegations about maybe some disappointment with where the city's gone with the green area. Without getting into too many details and challenging items, I can tell you that what the city has indicated as green is more than where we are at with the region and the region study. And the city does have very strong policies along with the region and the province about environmental conservation. I think we all know that we're some of the leaders in this area. And the other part that we're doing is making sure that it's linked to some of the other technical requirements. So we've been doing some water management work, and we're actually creating a detailed computer model about the stormwater management and groundwater in this area. We're taking a sub-watershed-like approach to get specific targets for here. We're not necessarily using broad targets. If there's going to be development, it has to respect the existing context of this area. And so we're doing a lot of our due diligence.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I think it's important to take a look back at that first development and then how this one's going to be done. I think is really important context. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other questions right now. Do we have a mover for this motion? Oh, yes, we do, Councillor Gazzola. And also, I guess I want to, even though there are no other questions from the committee, I have a question of my own. I just want to know two things. Is the vision for this natural heritage conservation area for there to be pathways and it to be open to the public, ideally, or has that been determined yet?
To the chair, number one priority is to make sure that the environmental area is conserved and protected. And so that's what this process will do and lead to the zoning for the area. The second step that you look at is how is it going to be maintained in the long term. And so whether it's in private ownership or public ownership, it needs a management plan. When we do the next step, specifically related to pathways and trails, that is something that the environmental impact study will look at, is the potential for that. And then you get into that as the stages of this process go on. Okay, thanks. And then my other question is,
have you considered less density in the area along River Road the future River Road and the current Huron Road? I'm just wondering, it looked like, based on the comments, that previous iterations may have had less density and that now we have more. Is that correct?
So to the chair, the project team has looked at a variety of options. The preferred option that we put out for public review back in November of last year did not include the red high-rise res area. So if that's considered that this plan is a little bit more dense, there is some slight increase. I think when you see the comments in the delegation on behalf of the landowner, that was indicating the extent of the high-rise res that they were looking at. That's where staff have balanced the divergent opinions from those that are looking at maybe seeing it as no colors.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we're in for comments. If committee would like to bring in comments, starting with Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, and I'm pleased to give my comments at the beginning rather than the end. I have been interested in this area for all the time I've been on council, recognizing that it is a jewel that we're fortunate to have. Just over the weekend, I was looking just at various parks, and I always go back to Central Park, which is an amazing thing in New York City, and it's hard to believe, but that's 840 acres in the middle of New York. I looked at this here in Hidden Valley area. We're looking in the neighborhood of 200 acres. Victoria Park, as an example, is 59 acres, and the Huron Natural Area is about 250 acres. So I think we have come a long way with this. I remember being on a regional committee that was looking at the road going through, and at one point it was coming right through the middle almost of that green area, and a great deal has been done in moving the road over to the outer area so that it doesn't infringe on the sensitive area. So there are as we start, and it's the other thing is we're just really getting into the process. There's a lot of studies that need to be done, and there won't be any construction crews out there in the next couple of years. Okay, there's a lot of study that has to be done, and when those studies are brought back, council will be in a decision to come up with a good, hopefully an ideal secondary plan. We have at the start of the gate here, we have two somewhat opposing views. There are those that want to have it all green, and those that on the other side that have invested in the property and do want to see some development. So where we go is important. I've always favored as much green as possible. I'm hoping going down the road that there are ways we can do that to get as much green as possible, and at the same time not shortchanging the developer who has spent considerable funds to get into this property and maintain it to this point. But we do need to start moving on it, because it is a jewel that we really should be enjoying, I think, more than we are now. Right now, it's private property. So really, anybody that is going on that land is really trespassing, and that's the way it has to be until we deal with this issue. So I think it's important that we do start the movement. I don't think we have any choice in that. The only thing we're deciding today is, do we start on this or do we defer it for another 3 or 4 years? But eventually we have to get to this point. So I'm pleased with where it's gone so far. Staff have reached out to the community before it even got this point. We've had two public meetings. Staff are I know at one time Brandon even moved his office down to the operations center to be closer there to the people in the community, to give them an opportunity to sit down and discuss things. So there's going to need to be a lot more of that in the future. This is the start, and I trust everyone will support getting started on the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I am going to support this. I think actually it's much better than I was expecting in terms of the preservation of green space. We look at situations like this and we reduce the density at our own peril at times, because there are those of us, and I think the majority of us, that are very supportive of the countryside line, for example. And the less intensity we have in the line that we can control, the more pressure we're going to start seeing for that line that we cannot necessarily control, pushing outside the city, and no one wants to see that. What we have before us, I think, is an extremely reasonable beginning. I have to credit equally the Friends of Hidden Valley, especially those that don't even live in the area, taking the NIMBY argument entirely out of the equation, for getting us to this point. On the flip side of that is the owner of the property. The owner of the property has deep roots in the community and obviously cares deeply about making sure that he does what's right by the community, but also realistically protecting his own interests on the lands that are developable. And to be clear, the protected lands are significant. As Councillor Gazzola pointed out, we will be protecting, right off the bat here, we're protecting something like 4 to 5 Victoria Parks. That is a significant amount of protected land. And I think it's a great start, and I think it's again, between those that advocated for it and the property owner, I think we're starting off in a great place, and I will support it.
Thank you. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And to be honest, I'm going to be guilty of repeating earlier comments because there's really no other way of looking at this. The Land Use Master Plan is almost 2 decades in the making, and extensive consultation has gone into place. And it's with the consultation with the advocacy groups and staff and the developer that has surprisingly allowed the conservation of significant amounts of this land. And although segments of it is proposed for somewhat higher density, but to be honest, we speak about this area being a gem. Well, that's what we want our residents to have, that ability to be neighboring this naturally significant heritage, landscape heritage, so they can enjoy that aspect of beauty and the community, overall community, the benefit that would provide for that new developed area. And even though it's still, this is simply just the master plan, there's still extensive amount of studies left to happen, and it may be another decade before any serious development starts to happen. And I think we have come to a really balanced approach in sense of conservation and with the interest of growth of our community. And I think this is a good master plan and a good endeavor to proceed forward. So I am also in support.
Thank you very much. Mayor Urbanovic.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone for coming in this afternoon and for all of your work on this for so many years. I will be supporting the motion that Councillor Gazzola has brought forward. I think, as has been said, there's, I think both groups have been very open to dialogue over the last number of years, and I think we've made a lot of progress and headway that's gotten us to this point. But I think we can't lose sight of the fact that, as has been pointed out, this is the beginning of a process, and no doubt there will continue to be additional dialogue going forward. And I was particularly pleased to hear that as we, look at the development pieces of this, we really look at how this can be a model not just for our own community, but potentially a model for the province and the country in terms of how to preserve this kind of property. I think as a city, we have had a good history a very good history of protecting green spaces in our community. Whether you think about, Victoria Park, which is probably in many ways our longest investment, being over 100 years old. The investment that happened numerous years ago in terms of the Huron Natural Area, the work that we did with respect to Kiwanis Park and getting that back into the city's ownership when in the mid-90s the GRCA wanted to mine it for gravel, and that we've revitalized with community partners, and on Neighbors Day could not believe the hundreds and hundreds of people that were there with their families enjoying the park and the pool, and all of the resources, whether it was sort of the natural trails as well as things like the open space and so on. And then this I know will continue to play an important role in terms of the community's overall assets in this regard, in the fullness of time, and benefit the broader community as we go through this whole process. So I just want to thank everyone for the work that they've undertaken, and I look forward to seeing where this goes, because I think it truly will be a jewel for the community as we go through the remainder of the processes.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Marsh. I'm prepared to support the recommendation put forward by Councillor Gazzola, and the way I look at this as well from the staff's perspective, I look at it as this is a really well done plan so far, and I commend Brandon and the rest of the team who's behind this. I think it does accomplish a lot of things what we heard throughout the community, so I do commend you for that. And the way I'm looking at this too as a whole, and there could be even further preservation depending on what these white areas are, and the one portion is kind of significant. The other thing too that I would like to look upon too is having bumped into Peter in London during a net zero community that was built by Sifton Group, and I know that he's very keen in doing something very, very similar to that, and maybe have a district energy or whatever that may be. I know he's thinking, and I know that's what he wants, and I know that's where his goal. So I think whatever is built there will have definitely a less impact on the area. So I do respect that area. So, and also in addition to, I've never been a really big fan of these huge estate lots, and I think if we can have some more people that will benefit such a jewel, a gem as Hidden Valley is, I think we should look at a little bit more of that, even though built on a net zero or basis. But again, I'm looking forward to, I know this has been a long process, and I do look forward to seeing this eventually pull through and hopefully not be so much of a hidden gem, and we'll see where that goes.
All right, and I'll just make my comments as well. I want to thank all the delegates who came here today to share your perspectives. We really did have quite a couple of different, very different points of view, and some in between. And I think we have some really great opportunities to look further into some of the ideas that were brought forward today. And I'm very excited to see us looking at preserving as much of the Hidden Valley green space as possible. I will support the plan today as well, but I also would have liked to see no high density in this area, so that we can make sure that any built form that is added to be right adjacent to the green space, that it is going to be respectful and compatible to the natural areas. But I really do appreciate all the work that staff have put in so far, and of course the Friends of the Hidden Valley group, and I know that Daphne Nichols' spirit lives on today as we are looking at this area, and so I think that as we go forward in future iterations, that we can be proud of the direction we're heading in. So with that, we'll take a vote on the recorded vote has been called. And that carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And that concludes part one of our meeting today. We'll be returning at 7 p.m. Thank you.